I feel really lucky to have grown up with parents, grandparents who had a kind of land ethic, and I don't know where my granddad really got it, but he had this way. We are a part of this place, like a part of our body. You know what I mean? It's who we are, and we have to take care of it. And the idea that my dad's always had, and it's kind of like this weight, this thing that guides him, that he wants to leave this place in better shape than when it came to him.
The trees, plants, animals, insects, the water, everything. They said, you know now. In other words, as people, all of us started forgetting about how we're supposed to take care of them.
You take a certain pride in the land that is endangered by an outside enterprise coming in and taking over, doing what they want to do, regardless of any consideration for the land or the water or the air.
I'm a third generation rancher. We're into the fifth generation now in this area. Both of my grandparents had ranches 8 miles apart on the Rosebud Creek. I never thought that more than half of my life would be devoted to an effort to save the things that a lot of us value.
This ranch has been in my family since the late 1800s, but the minerals we only own, our family only owns about a quarter of the minerals that we are on top of. The rest are federal minerals, a few state minerals, but mostly federal minerals.
Well, the coal company frontmen were in this area as well as active down in the coal strip area. The men from here went down to see, what they were doing about it, what kind of contracts were being offered to them in comparison to what was being offered here.
Tonight I want to have an unpleasant talk with you about a problem that's unprecedented in our history.
At this time, the United States was becoming increasingly concerned about reliance on foreign oil. Shortages caused the country to scramble to create domestic energy sources. Coal was emerging as the most popular option for U.S.-produced energy.
This goes clear back to the early 70s when they first came in, and that was when the first kind of coal rush started.
Much of this country, particularly in the West, was once a sea. Today it's a sea of scrub oak, sand, and sage. And beneath its surface lie rich pools of oil and beds of coal, enough, some say, to answer our needs for centuries.
By acting now, we can control our future instead of letting the future control us.
Landowners across Montana were sitting on 25% of the country's supply of coal, and along with Wyoming, were considered ground zero for massive development. In Montana, most properties are split estates, meaning one person owns the land, but another outside entity owns a portion of the minerals underneath. This goes back to the 19th century, when the federal government gave land and mineral rights to railroad companies to incentivize Western expansion. The mineral owner is dominant, so the landowners who didn't want coal mining not only worried about the impact mining would have on their land and water, but whether they had the right to say no to it at all.
Coal companies from the east were sending their landmen out to secure coal and to secure the land. And
Consol came around with their plan to strip mine the bulls. The Consol boys, we learned that they would lie and they would con. They gave Mother a release of damages to sign and told her who all had signed it, and she called those people and nobody had signed it.
mines land people were coming around and really kind of lying to people and telling them, oh, your neighbors have all signed and they've all sold out, and you're surrounded by it, you might as well sign here. And so they had to do this brave thing, which was to talk to their neighbors about what they were doing.
Well, I was 18 or 19 when this first started happening. And so when the coal companies did this, they first came in, they wanted to strip mine and they wanted to basically buy us out. Just that prospect that's kind of been hanging there my whole life.
My parents went to Colstrip to the North Central Power Study meeting where they really got panicked. They went and they heard about these huge, massive plans to develop, coal mines, power plants, slurry lines, railroads. This massive, from here to this area all the way to Gillette, Wyoming. And my parents came back from that meeting, and the way Mom describes it, they were just furious and frightened.
We started getting copies of the North Central Power Study.
My father was an expert on the North Central Power Study. I think he read it cover to cover at one point.
Well, it was a blueprint for turning eastern Montana and northern Wyoming into the boiler room of the nation, irregardless of what might happen.
The North Central Power Study was the first time we heard the term a national sacrifice area.
Nobody likes to believe that they live in something that's about to be declared a national sacrifice area, and that's where we live.
Probably one of the most important aspects and reasons for not wanting a strip mine is a loss of water and the uncertainty of whether you're going to have wells go dry. And
it's sort of like a bathtub. If you pull the plug on the bathtub, the whole bathtub drains. So that's kind of like the aquifer. You put a big mine in one part of it, you are going to drain the whole area, even if you're not necessarily mining the whole entire area.
It took the grit of families spread across eastern Montana to connect the dots and form an organization. That night, everyone chipped in $5 for membership. This was the first meeting of the Northern Plains Resource Council.
I have been a member of Northern Plains, well, officially a member since I think about 1995. Thought I always was a member till they told me that, that I had my own membership, because I think I was about 5 years old when my parents and others actually formed Northern Plains.
I think it was the spring of '72, they had a meeting in at Charters, and I wasn't here for it.
Well, I'm in Charters, and I'm one of the founders of the Gold Mountain Land and Persevered.
And at that meeting, they decided that they should have a group. And I think it was Ellen's mom, Louise, came up with the name Northern Plains Resource Council.
My mother came up with that name. She was kind of pleased with it.
When we first started our organization, it was a specific thing to oppose strip mining in the rural mountains. But as the organization progressed, we found that all the issues that came to our land and our water and our air and people in Montana were important.
Rural communities in eastern Montana weren't used to reaching out to their neighbors. This group of families stepped out of their comfort zones to save their homes and livelihoods. The stakes were high. Communication was vital.
I got a call from Ann Charter, and she said, "We've started this organization to fight strip mining. Would you guys be interested in coming home and being staff members? We need somebody to, do the work." We said, "Sure," not knowing what the hell that was. So.
After I finished college, I came back to Montana. And I hadn't been here very long when I met Boyd and Ann Charter.
I remember going to the Stapleton building in downtown Billings. We had a little small, 20 by 20 office. Met Get Muller and Pat Sweeney, and of course Steve and I, so we were the original staff for those first few months.
And I began to hear about what was going on in the eastern part of Montana with the coal companies moving in.
There were some young people just kind of getting out of college and wanting to do something meaningful, and so they were kind of hearing about these ranchers fighting the coal companies. And nobody really knew exactly what they were doing, but just that was kind of good because we didn't know what we couldn't do.
I was a history major in Missoula, and one of my first and one of my most important professors was K. Ross Toole.
There are, I think, undeniably new winds sweeping across America. They are indeed gusty and changeable, but they are new, and they will alter what happens in Montana. And whether for better or worse does depend on Montanans and how they, or you, read those winds.
He was also like a key mentor for a lot of us early on when we started Northern Plains. I also went to college during the Vietnam War, so part of my own history too was as a young college student being an activist.
We had a staff, didn't have an office. Then they finally got an old house somewhere that a whole bunch of them lived in, like a bunch of hippies.
It was this combination of ranchers and then also these college kids. Strange bedfellows, I guess you'd call it.
We saw that coal strip was just the beginning of many of these things, and so we set out to defeat that plan and to bring some reasonableness into development of coal resources so they didn't overwhelm all the communities.
We don't communicate with one another. It's all held in. But Northern Plains gives people an opportunity to break down that barrier.
We joined Northern Plains group early on. It's important to me is that credit is given to those people who stepped in to take our parts. And that happened in every family who had someone leave the home front to fight the national battle.
I do remember after that time just meetings, my mom being gone a lot, traveling.
My grandma Ann Charter was one of the founding members with Northern Plains, and she was just a powerhouse. I think Northern Plains attracts really strong women to their organization.
And that's what Northern Plains is about. Trade information and strategize to fight those sons of bitches.
There was a Constitution Convention that was going on in the early 70s.
It was a fairly progressive constitution.
It voted in annual legislative sessions. So we had 3 sessions in 3 years, 73, 4, and 5. We had opportunities to run legislation right off the bat. The election of 74 really changed the nature of the legislature. So the 75 legislature was even more pro-conservation.
Montana's new constitution stated that Montanans had a right to a clean and healthful environment. The Northern Plains Resource Council felt an obligation to fight to make that statement true.
It was always so beautiful down along the river, and we could see cranes and eagles, and that's the scenery that runs through my mind. I woke up and I thought, I have to do something about speaking up for my homeland here, because I want it to stay pristine, quiet, beautiful.
Northern Plains began by challenging coal leasing across eastern Montana. Many mines and power plants were proposed to feed the nation's insatiable appetite for electricity.
We recognized that we were going to have to go to the legislature and work on stuff, and it was coming up quick, and I certainly hadn't done anything like that before, and so we were scrambling to work on legislation.
And there was this huge debate in those days too about, could we ban strip mining completely, or do we have to regulate it? So we started out with many of us on the ban strip mining, stop it all together, and pushed, to get as much as we could on the reclamation side. This is what I worked a lot on too, was the reclamation law. Right, because Montana did not have an adequate law to regulate strip mining. And there were proposals for Decker, and there was the Rosebud mine, and the Bull Mountain mine, and then the Sarpy mine. So those were all popping up. So the reclamation law was like a very important piece of the work we did in 73.
1973 would find the state legislature preparing for changes that massive strip mining would bring. Coal issues were dividing communities. Members and staff had to turn their passion for the land into tangible lobbying and organizing efforts. It wasn't enough to care. They needed to act. Northern Plains was emerging as a small but mighty force in the movement.
Eventually, strip mine reclamation law was passed that basically said to the coal companies, if you want to mine coal, you have to reclaim the land. We had a state law before the federal law was passed. In fact, a lot of the federal law was patterned after the work we had done in Montana. That was a major win for us, and in fact, Gordy and I were both in the Rose Garden when the President Carter signed the strip mine reclamation law.
For 38 years, Northern Plains fought against the Tongue River Railroad. The railroad's original purpose was to shave mileage off of the existing railroad that sent coal to the upper Midwest power plants. When that didn't pan out, the purpose changed to ship coal overseas. This would mean a railroad would cut through a pristine river valley with highly productive agricultural land important to the Northern Cheyenne people. Members of the tribe joined the fight. People of the valley feared what would happen to their land, water, air, and communities if coal development industrialized the area.
The Tongue River Railroad had kind of popped back up as a real threat.
My name is Clint McRae. I'm a fourth-generation rancher from southeastern Montana. We're standing along the Tongue River Valley, along the proposed Tongue River Railroad site.
My dad had gotten this letter threatening condemnation. The first 89 miles had kind of been approved, and then the next chunk, 41 miles of the Tongue River Railroad, would go through our ranch. And I just realized, my dad, he's not up to going to meetings. I remember one of his first comments that he wrote was like, a rancher should not have to tell people why having a railroad through his business is not a good thing.
And I think before the issue any more permanent, they better find out more about it.
Even though it wasn't happening on the reservation, there was always concern that that could happen. If we spoke against the stuff that was going on outside of the reservation, maybe our tribe wouldn't look at coal development as a solution to address poverty and things like that here.
It always felt so impossible. All the politicians wanted it. In the early days of the railroad, our Northern Plains staff gathered something like 1,000 verified statements. But it was also community gatherings. I remember a meeting in Lame Deer where there must have been 200 people there. It went on for hours, and it was really great.
I got involved with all the testimonies, hearing, and watching all the young people, all the young Cheyenne people were in line to testify. Every one of them did not want a railroad across the river from Cheyenne country.
The tribe has always been our ally with fighting the railroads, and so I think that's the other thing that's interesting about this story is, for a pretty rural, pretty reticent, pretty conservative community to do the kind of reaching out and organizing and getting together with others, which is just not culturally what we do, but we do through Northern Plains.
Anywhere there was coal has caused problems for somebody, period.
It pretty much tore families apart. The neighbors were on opposite sides of the fence.
The whole coal mining issue, those families that were for it, those people that, they owned the coal rights, they wanted to make money, and that was what they thought their inheritance was. We, always wanted to ranch and take care of our land and water, and that's what we felt like was ours to have and to hold and to protect.
I think there's always been a difference between the people that work on the staff of the Northern Plains Resource Council and the members of the Northern Plains Resource Council.
I think one of the things that was so impressive from the very beginning was that it wasn't the staff who did any of the talking. It was members.
The long-term members have to pace themselves. I think we're distance runners, and I think if we're going to continue to do that year after year after year, we have to save our strength.
Testifying is one of the really important things. to have that contact with committees in Washington was extremely important.
You know, when you have personal stake in the game, you're willing to step beyond what you might normally do, and even if it's uncomfortable, you recognize that there's a reason you need to go do this.
The staff, on the other hand, I think that they have to be sprinters, and they have to really push hard and maybe be the anchor on the end of the relay. It's not an easy job. Neither is an easy job, and both of them are important.
What started with coal has become a 50-year fight for a better Montana.
The fight still goes on, and it will continue. And I think it was a surprise to the opposition to realize that we, as member organizations, had the power to overcome whatever it was that they wanted to do to us.
Northern Plains continues to take on issues that stand in the way of Montanans' right to a clean and healthful environment, such as promoting renewable energy, fighting air pollution, mining law reform, saving the family farm, protecting groundwater from coal bed methane, preventing mega landfills for out-of-state garbage, promoting local foods, encouraging homegrown prosperity to revitalize local economies, reclaiming disturbed land and polluted water, working to abolish livestock monopolies and restore fair cattle markets, and building Montana's most energy-efficient office building. To this day, the group builds community and encourages members to stand up for what they believe in.
When you have an organized citizenry that's taking action, that's when you see change, and Northern Plains has been that force that organizes us.
It certainly hasn't all been roses, and it certainly hasn't all been wins. It's just people enabling people to take a stand and say what they want to say.
Like, you're stronger as a group than you are as an individual.
We've got a lot of history here over a lot of Northern Plains, and we're going to roll over here one of these days. I don't work with all the staff anymore, and a lot of them I don't know, but the ones I run into, are great. That's great to see, knowing that a younger generation will come in and take this over.
What Northern Plains teaches us is that an organized group of people with heart and grit can stand up to any Goliath and win. Many of us involved in Northern Plains will tell you that our lives are richer and deeper for having been involved. We experienced and came to understand that justice doesn't happen on its own. We must make it happen.
I can be so worried about something that's happening in Montana and just frustrated by reading the news, and then I'll go to a board meeting or I'll go to a meeting and I'll see people thinking through it and a plan and how we're going to go after it, and this sort of relief feeling, the feeling of wow, these great minds, an incredible dedication, and we're gonna be okay. And that I feel grateful for all the time,